Okay, so if you're coming from my unboxing and first impressions of the Mobula 6, welcome back to the channel and thank you. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link above and below where you can take a look at that. So we have all our components here from left to right. We have our box style goggles, and we'll be using this to make sure the VTX is working and it's on the right channel. We do have our Mobula 6 right here, very, very light, and this is the reason why we're here today. We'll be doing a setup on this. And then on the right, we have our radio. This is the Jumper T-Lite. Pretty cool radio. It's my daily driver, and it's a really amazing radio for beginners and first-time pilots. Besides that, we have 4 batteries here, the 300 milliamp hour 1S batteries, and it is pretty cool. The half model did include 4 batteries in the kit. So with all that said, let's begin the setup here. The first thing we're gonna do is bind this drone to the radio. Now there's 2 ways to do this. You can power the drone here with the 1S battery, and there is a bind button right here on the left, and you can bind it with that process. I am gonna go another route. I am gonna go on the computer and do it that way in Betaflight. You do eventually have to go on Betaflight to make sure that these switches here are configured correctly, so you have the right arm, disarm, beeper, crash, flip mode on or configured properly. So we do have to go to Betaflight anyways. So let's go to the computer. We're gonna plug this into Betaflight, set up the whole switches, and also do the binding process on the computer as well. If that process doesn't work, then we'll come back here and do it the old-fashioned way. All right, guys, so we're here at the computer. We have our equipment here. We have our drone, we have our radio, and our goggles here. I also have my fan right here. I like to keep the drone cool as I'm working on it because the components do get hot, especially the VTX. So I have a fan here to keep this whole thing cool. All right, so let's plug this into the computer. Micro USB on the bottom here. All right, awesome. All right, let's go to Betaflight. Pretty cool. Everything is looking good so far. Upside down. All right, so I'm just gonna save the tune here, the configuration on the flight controller here. DIFFELL. All right, so ports, this looks all good. We have 2 UARTs here. None is checked off because we're using the SPI receiver in here. We are using one of the UARTs for the VTX, which is good. Props are out, so that's good. The props are already installed in here, so that's not a big deal. Looks good. Power, it's a 1S, minimum voltage 3, max has pretty high. Warning 3.1, which is also pretty cool as well. It's not 3.5 on the dot, so they did this pretty good for a 1S battery. Receiver, this is not gonna work because it's not bound yet or bind to the radio yet, so let's move on here. Well, I guess I can't do any of this stuff yet, so let's just bind this thing. So the way you're gonna bind this is the way I wanted to do it. I'm gonna power on my radio.
Welcome to OpenTX.
And I already have a profile for this drone already built into here. It says Mobula 6, but it's not bound yet. So I'm just gonna go to the model here, setup, and go to our internal module, RF. All right, D8 select, because that's what it's showing in here. I could probably change it, but no big deal. So now my radio is ready to go to bind. It's gonna be in the bind mode. So all I'm gonna do here is the command FR sky _ BIND, and let's see if it takes it. It's in the binding mode, so let's just do it here. Enter. It's flashing. It's solid, and I think we are good here. I think we are bound. And sure enough, I have telemetry right here, so not a bad way to bind a radio. So let's see if that worked. So let's see here if I have modes here, and it's flipping out. So let's hit that. Save. And roll. That looks better. And let's go to the modes. Now we can do our tabs. OSD, this is obviously a matter of a preference, and there's a lot going on here. Let's disconnect this bad boy. All right, so this is all done. All right, guys, this is all set up the way I want it. The right channel and band, the right power output, everything looks good. We have a connection is bind to my radio. We're gonna do a flight. We're probably gonna start off in the room first, do a nice quick flight, and then see how far we can go, probably go downstairs, and then probably go outside. So let's put on the goggles and go for a flight outside, guys. All right, guys, we are back from the flight, and the Mobula6 is, pretty amazing drone. First flight, we started here in the room. I wanted to fly here line of sight and see how it felt, just see how it behaved. And sure enough, I armed it, and it just got squirrely. It got really out of hand here, guys. But it seems like the more that you fly FPV, the more you kind of lose your proficiency line of sight. So I said, you know what, that's gonna be a short flight. Let's just call that a day. So I put the goggles on and went flying, and it was almost like second nature, guys. So the whole theme here, especially with these smaller drones, is just throttle management, and that's something that I have to work on for sure. But yes, as you saw here, kind of bobbing and weaving, going up and down throughout the whole room here. But no big deal, it worked pretty fine. Having said that, guys, I've flown this around a few times, and I don't know if it was normal or not, but I'm around between 45 and 50% throttle when flying this, or just hovering this. You know, it's not really impacting the battery life, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Another thing I noticed here is that if I find a position where I can keep it hovering, after a few seconds, it would just dip down or just shoot up. So you're constantly modulating the throttle to fly something this light. So we flew in the studio here for a while, went downstairs, and it worked pretty fine. At first, I think I did have the camera angle a little too steep. So we brought it back upstairs, lowered the camera angle to get a little bit more slower flight indoors. And sure enough, I went back downstairs, pretty nice, went around the whole living room, came back upstairs. Yeah, and the more I flew it, less oscillations with the throttle, less up and down movements, and it worked pretty well. So after a while, I decided to go outside, went outside, and I'm up here in the studio. And sure enough, guys, it worked pretty well. Went outside, got a little bit of breakup. It's a little bit windy today, so I did feel the wind a little bit, but nothing crazy there. Now, I said, okay, let's do some outdoor flying. It is windy, I would say between 10 miles an hour, 10 and 50 miles an hour. And you can see a couple times I went outside, and as soon as I went from beyond the building or the house, the wind would just take it and drift it. I mean, this thing is so tiny. So did some one power loop, a roll as well, and it worked pretty fine. And as I said before, you're at 50%, between 40 and 50% throttle, just hovering. So to recover from a dive, it did require almost sometimes 100% throttle to not hit the ground. Now, this is the Runcam Nano 3. I've used the Runcam Nano 4 on the Tiny Hawk 3 as of recent. That's their newest version of this camera. And I don't know what I was expecting. Obviously, this is the former version of that camera. So, but it worked okay. The colors are decent. It just seems like the resolution wasn't as good as the Runcam Nano 4, which is fine. And the big thing for me was also the exposure. It didn't really compensate for exposure too well and too fast. So when I was going downstairs, and before I went outside the sliding door to get into the porch, it would be all blown out, just really blown out. And sometimes I would just be hovering, if you saw, right behind myself and looking outside, and it would just be totally blown out. But once you go outside in the brighter environment, it did compensate and adjust, and it was adequate. Now talking about the camera, let's talk about the VTX, which is connected to the camera here. And the VTX, this is a 25 milliwatt VTX, nothing crazy. Obviously, you're not going to need that much power for an indoor ripper, and this is an indoor drone, so 25 milliwatts actually is pretty decent. I had no issues indoors here. I went downstairs, I had no breakup, and then I did go outside in the porch to get a little bit of breakup, and that's when I was sitting up here. And it did a pretty good job, guys. I was expecting a lot worse performance than that. It really exceeded my expectations. Let's talk a little bit about the battery here. The battery in this is pretty good. It's a 300 milliamp hour battery, 1S, and it's very, very small. I don't have one here. They're charging right now. But they did an okay job. Now, I am clearly not the best pilot, especially for indoors and for tiny whoops like this. So I'm not gonna claim anything like that. But with just my smooth shooting the gap type of flying, I got between 4.5 to 5 minutes of flying, usually around the 450 mark. I'm sure if you flew this the way this thing was designed to be flown, pretty more aggressive, flying faster, yeah, you might lose a whole minute, because what I was doing was just really gentle flying. All right, guys, so with all of that said, who is this drone for? Well, this thing has been up for a few years now, a year, maybe to a year and a half, definitely over a year. If you live in a colder climate, you can't go outdoors, this is the drone for you. If you want to fly indoors and you have gaps everywhere, you just have even a tight space, this will fly pretty good, because this house is pretty decently spaced, so there's not a lot of obstacles in here. But if you're a really good pilot, you can rip this thing pretty well. Now, if you're also a beginner pilot or just trying to get into the FPV world, then this is not bad either. It's really, really affordable, under $100, and it comes with 4 batteries, which is simply amazing, guys. Now, my biggest concern here is just that this board, all-in-one board, if anything were to fail, then yeah, you just gotta get a new one. So yeah, guys, let me know what you think about this drone down below. If you have any questions about this drone or anything I've done here today, leave them down below. I'll be happy to answer those. And if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to the channel. Therefore, you'll be notified whenever I do drop a new FPV video. So anyway, thank you for sticking around and watching the video, and I will see you in the next video. Peace!